Can there be a solution to the conflict in Gaza? If so, there could be peace in the Middle East. I mean, there could be peace around this specific part of the Middle East because there are actually many other conflicts going on there, but I guess the Gaza conflict is the loudest one, so we can have some peace and quiet if we solved it. I guess most of you know the story by now. There's a concentration of Palestinian population in the Gaza Strip. The Strip was held by Egypt after the establishment of the State of Israel, but then it was occupied by Israel in the Six-Day War, along with the Sinai Peninsula, which has since been returned to Egypt. And then in 2005, the Israelis pulled out of Gaza in order to let the Palestinian Authority govern it, and then Hamas, which is an organization that is recognized as terrorist in many countries, seized control of the Strip. In response to that, Israel and Egypt have blockaded the Gaza Strip, and since then, Hamas and Israel clash every few years. The conflict has reached some sort of boiling point on the 7th of October 2023 when Hamas has attacked Israel and committed unspeakable acts of barbarity in its attack. Right. So that was a very fast way of telling the story so far. In retaliation to the Hamas attacks, Israel has vowed to destroy its capabilities in the Gaza Strip. In order to accomplish a more sustainable solution for itself in the future, it appears that Israel is also attempting to push the Palestinians of Gaza further down south. How do we know that? Well, first, Israel is mostly bombing the northern part of the Strip. Second, the Israeli army explicitly calls for the Palestinian civilian population to evacuate south. Third, Israel has cut off water and electricity supplies to the Gaza Strip, but it is letting some water and electricity flow into the southern part of it. So why? Why push for them to move south? Well, it seems like the Israeli army pushes for the Palestinians to completely get out of the Gaza Strip. But wait, we've just said that the Gaza Strip is blocked by both Israel and Egypt. So how will these people get out? Well, we've just seen what happens when they get out into Israeli territory during the Hamas assault, so that's probably not what Israel is aiming for. No. Israel is probably aiming for masses of Palestinians to flee into Egypt. And this would actually be a solution to the long-standing Gaza conflict. Would it work? I mean, let's compare sizes for a moment. The Gaza Strip is 365 square kilometers. Israel is 22,000 square kilometers. Egypt is 1,000,000 square kilometers, and the Sinai Peninsula, which is a relatively uninhabited area in northern Egypt, is 60,000 square kilometers. Furthermore, even if Egypt were to take in 2 million Arabs from the Gaza Strip, it would barely make a dent on its massive population of more than 109 million people, as opposed to Israel's 9 million. On top of that, both the Arabs from Gaza and the Egyptians are Sunni Muslims, which makes them close in beliefs and culture. And as even greater added bonus, many countries would probably support this financially, giving the Egyptians and the Gazans great compensation for this move. Egypt could give about 1,000 square kilometers of the Sinai Peninsula for the Gazans, which is less than 0.1% of its landmass, and this will increase the Palestinian Gazans area, so sounds great. Would this work? Well, that's what we're going to investigate here today. But first, we need to ask, how do you solve the Israel-Palestine conflict? Well, when you try to solve a conflict, you need to look at what both sides want, so that you can see if you could meet halfway, or make some other accommodating arrangement. Okay, so let's start with the Israelis. What do they want? If you ask the average Israeli, they would just say that they want peace. But I am trying to be a bit more sophisticated than that, because peace can be many things. I can build an artificial island in the middle of the Pacific and have a beautiful country there. But that's not what the Israelis really want. So what do they really want? Also, I can't really build an artificial island in the middle of the Pacific, but let's move on. Well, they want peace within the Israeli state, which is the land that they see themselves as having an indigenous connection to. The land of their forefathers. This Israeli state is, by its own definition, a Jewish and democratic state. These are the two most important definitions of Israel. These two things are also kind of opposed to one another, but let's not get into that here. So that's what the Israelis want. The nation of Israel to be Jewish, democratic, and at peace. Right? Right. What do the Palestinians in Gaza want? Okay, so the Gaza Strip is actually controlled by Hamas, which has its own demands and aspirations, but still, let's ask, what do the Palestinians want? So in the short term, they want First of all, for Israel to remove the blockade over the Gaza Strip. I mean, they would like Egypt to remove the blockade as well, but for many reasons, it's easier to be mad at Israel, so let's stick with that for now. The Palestinian aspiration is also to live in peace, in what it considers historical Palestine, which is what is today called the State of Israel. From the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free. Ever heard that slogan? Well, what's from the river to the sea? Well, that's the entirety of the State of Israel. In addition, Hamas's aspirations, as we have plainly seen in the Hamas attack on Israel, is to kill the occupiers with whatever means possible. Right, so Hamas's aspiration might be a bit problematic for Israel, and actually even the more widely accepted Palestinian aspiration of establishing a state on what they call historic Palestine, from the river to the sea, is also problematic for Israel. Another very big aspiration of the Palestinians is to return. What they mean when they say return is to return to the land from which their ancestors were expelled after the First Arab-Israeli War, in which the Arabs attacked the Israelis and lost. During that war, many Palestinian Arabs fled or were expelled from the territory that is now the State of Israel. Israel refuses to let these Palestinians return because A. these people are hostile towards Israel and would serve to undermine it from within. B. it kind of runs against the idea of a Jewish state to admit so many Arabs into it that could serve to undermine it. And C. many of these Arabs would be refugees, and accepting so many refugees is pretty much never a good idea by any country, especially by Israel, which is not that populated. Right, so after seeing what the two groups want here, it does not seem like it is possible to reach a good conclusion. Both groups' aspirations are mutually exclusive. One cannot be fulfilled while also fulfilling the other. Now we can go back to the whole Gaza, Israel, Egypt situation. Okay, so according to what we have just discussed, we cannot really solve the Israel-Palestine conflict. What we could do is resolve Israel-Gaza conflict, realistically, by pushing the Gaza population into Egypt, which appears to be what Israel is trying to do. But would this work? Well, I'm sorry to ruin the party, but here are some reasons which would lead to Egypt not wanting to accept any Palestinian refugees into its territory. First of all, the presence of Palestinian refugees in large numbers in the neighboring countries has never been a good thing for them in the past. Jordan, for example, has a lot of Palestinians living in it, and it actually fought a civil war with its Palestinian population who have tried to take over it. And Lebanon was utterly decimated by wars when the Palestinian organizations in it have launched attacks against Israel from Lebanese territory. There is almost a 0% chance of Palestinian attacks against Israel not to come out of Egypt, if it accepts that many Palestinian refugees. So while the Arab countries are not great fans of Israel, none of them would hurry and volunteer to take in Palestinian refugees, which could get them into trouble. Second, the Gaza population is especially problematic. We are talking about people who have spent almost 20 years under Hamas rule, which would mean that it is very likely to have Hamas connections within vast swaths of the population. Egypt would not want to take in so many people who could potentially turn out to be Hamas members, which Egypt is hostile towards. By the way, this hostility between Egypt and Hamas would not only serve to prevent Egypt from accepting Gazans, but also to prevent Hamas from allowing its citizens to flee into Egypt. Third, by accepting the Palestinian refugees, Egypt would be seen as complicit in another Palestinian exodus. Egypt is kind of in a trap here. It is damned if it accepts the refugees and damned if it doesn't. If it does accept the refugees, then it has betrayed its Arab brethren in their fight against Israel. If it does not accept the refugees, then it has betrayed its Arab brethren in their terrible suffering inflicted by Israel by not taking them in. Fourth, accepting the Gazans as refugees into Egypt would lead to a huge shift in the power balance of the region. If Gaza were to be free of Hamas and of population hostile to Israel, then Israel's position in the area would improve substantially. This is something that Israel's other rivals in the region do not want to see happen. And I am not only referring to Iran, which is Israel's main enemy, but also to countries like Egypt and Turkey, who are not Israel's enemies, but are definitely its rivals. rivals. By keeping the Palestinian problem alive and kicking, these countries can weaken Israel, while also feigning interest in their so-called Palestinian brothers. A sad but true state of affairs. I mean, both Egypt and Jordan once ruled over what is now called Palestinian territories, and neither of them has ever considered granting them a state, but I'm getting distracted. Let's move on. Fifth, if Egypt were to let millions of Palestinian Arabs into its territory, that would mean that it has received some substantial compensation for it. But such compensation might strengthen Egypt too much for Israel to allow. So, does Israel want Egypt to take the Palestinians enough to be willing to pay the cost for it? That is, the cost of a stronger Egypt at its border. So, what's going to happen? Wherever the Palestinians of Gaza end up, the Egyptians are sure to play a key part of that solution. Is there something good enough that the world could offer Egypt so that they attempt to finally solve the problem? Well, those of you watching me from the future probably already know.